Hi, so we're here for our second podcast on the personal reservoir and individual fillers. And I'm here with a good friend of mine, Sean Miles, and I've known Sean for several years, and he does a really good job of managing his personal reservoir, and really does a great job with individual fillers. And so I thought that it would be fun to have him join us and to kind of have a dialogue back and forth. Sean has his MBA, also is co-owners of Have It Better. Sean, what do you want to say or plug there?
So I got my MBA from the University of San Diego. Did my undergrad at University of Texas at Austin. Actually came out of government and did a minor in business, but then kind of pivoted to doing business. Really love entrepreneurial work, but also have my corporate day job. So big into triathlon and fillers are super important for me to like stay level and stay energetic. I've got a 15-month-old, so trying to make sure that I'm there for him in my full, not zombie capacity.
Well, and Sean's hitting a really important point there, which is that with one of the most important aspects of the reservoir is that you can't give what you don't have.
Yeah.
And so resource management really begins with effectively managing your personal reservoir. And so last week, I talked a little bit about what the reservoir is, and just the concept that it's an easy way to think about the need to manage your reservoir or your resources and make sure that you're depositing more than you're withdrawing. And I talked a little bit last week about the drains happen as a normal part of life, and there are some drains that can be repaired, and there are some problems that can't be repaired. And so in terms of managing our resources, we can try to decrease what we're losing by repairing drains, obtaining more education or a better job, or eating better, or developing conflict resolution skills or anger management skills. A lot of things we can do to decrease what we lose. But the other really powerful thing that we can do in managing our resources is to fill back up. Yeah. And we fill up by engaging in what I call fillers. And fillers are anything that leave us better off for having done it. Anything that we do requires an outlay of energy. If I go exercise, it takes energy to go exercise. Or if I, even if this is a relationship filler, but if I take my wife on a date, it requires energy to do that. Or even if I pick up a book, it requires energy. But a filler leaves you better off. It leaves you with more resources than it takes to engage in that filler. And so, Sean, what are some examples of personal fillers that you use?
Yeah, so I want to start like the filler reservoir analogy for me was like phenomenal when you introduced it to me, years ago at this point, on the order of over a decade ago.
Yeah, crazy. I was thinking about that. I think I actually met you.
I think I was
almost 20 years ago.
Yeah. I mean,
like 18 years ago.
Yeah.
So anyway.
And so I remember that concept for me was just really foundational in being, I'm very structured in certain ways. And I think I've tried to develop structures and having that analogy in mind and what you were talking about of like limiting the drain. So it's like, it's like the pool guy repairing the pool, right? Like making sure there's not a bunch of crap. And then, not only that, but then making sure you're putting in more water than's coming out of those drains and everything. And so I think for me, a lot of my fillers came about, like some of them are natural, eating well, making sure that you're giving your body what it needs. And that, that's not always like eating perfect or anything like that. It's like, like I need to relax. I need to, have fun. And like, ice cream for me, like,
That can
not
be a filler in
overdoing it.
itself, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
having a treat can be a filler.
Exactly. And so like having things like that, is really like striking that fine balance of making sure that you're giving the body what it needs, but also giving your brain and your social, and like kind of weaving together a tapestry of fillers for myself. So, I think one of the ones that I really love is I've kind of going back to developing structures for myself, because I can be kind of an all or nothing type of person. Like that's just my go-to, my default, is habits. And so one of them is every Friday my wife and I go to lunch, and it's really great because Fridays typically are a little easier work day, and it gives us a nice break. It's nothing fancy. We just go to lunch, have a nice lunch, and just, I leave my phone in the car, and just sit down and have lunch with my wife. A daily one for me is my run. Like I know for me, and I think movement in general for people is like a pretty good filler. I default to running because I don't need to do anything other than stick my shoes on and like go out the door.
Yeah, which is good.
Time is limited. I think other ones, like time with friends, so I try and make sure that I schedule time with friends. I'm, I'm definitely extroverted, so like that's a filler for me. And I notice, like I definitely notice if, during the pandemic, I think everyone's struggling, and so I've tried to make a point of just, even if it's just a call, defaulting to FaceTime, and then calling if I can't get a hold of them, or texting or whatnot, but having a conversation, and just shooting the breeze, right?
Yeah. Yeah, connecting. I want to differentiate a little bit between individual fillers and relationship fillers, both of which are really important. And we'll talk more as we kind of move along here as well about relationship fillers. But anytime you have two people in a relationship, you also have a relationship reservoir, and that relationship reservoir has its own drains, and the relationship reservoir gets filled out of each individual's personal reservoirs, and so effective resource management really has to begin with effectively managing your personal reservoirs, and then choosing, like Sean's talking about, choosing to go on dates and choosing to maintain social connections and those things that nurture and take care of those relationship reservoirs as well. But personal fillers are things like exercise. And Sean hit another one that I want to comment on. Another important point with running is an easy one because you don't have to have a lot of equipment. You don't have to drive somewhere to do it. And it's really important to recognize how much time and how much hassle you have available to be able to engage in personal or relational fillers. One of my favorite personal fillers is mountain biking, and sometimes that's hard to do because I have to load up my bike in my truck, and I have to have a bike, I have to have a pump, I have to have a camelback and all these things, and then I have to drive someplace and then do my filler. And so if I've got an hour in the middle of the day, I can't go mountain biking.
Yeah.
But I can slip on my running shoes and grab the path that's, a quarter of a mile away from my house or my office here, and run. So it's a really, and I don't know that you were intentionally hitting that, but recognizing how much available time you have in a day to engage in fillers really should determine the kind and quality of fillers that you engage in. So if you've got 3 hours a day, you don't have to be very choosy. You can watch TV, you can take a nap, you can be kind of a little more relaxed or lazy in the fillers that you choose. But if you only have 30 minutes to do a filler in a day, you have to make sure that it's a really powerful filler.
Yeah. And I think like with the time thing, kind of blending my personality, like with our conversations and everything, and knowing like, okay, time is crunched. I'm like, I'm super obsessed with my time management and everything. Like just as an individual, that's like, like I like try and chart everything out. And so I have a list of like fillers with time. Like, and so it's like, okay, I've got 25 minutes. What can I do? And so one of them that I do is a personal filler is like learn something. So I literally, I'm like, okay, I've got a 30-minute block. I need 5 minutes of transition time. So I've got 25 minutes and I'm just going to read, or I'm going to like, and I literally study things. So like I have a pen and that's a filler for me, right? Like that, I like to do that. Learning something definitely, like it brings, like I can walk away and I'm like, man, that felt really good. I'm charged. It gives me energy. I like run into the living room and tell my wife all about what I learned. And she's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. And to his point, recognizing and understanding that about himself, Sean recently took a coding class because he wanted to develop an app. And, most I don't think most people would think, oh, I'm going to go take a coding class so I can develop an app. And especially conceptualize that as a filler. But the way you tackled that, I think, was a really good example of recognizing that learning something is a filler for you, and then being pretty structured in how you went about that.
And it's like learning and creating for me. So and a lot of my fillers, like I stumbled into, and I don't know if that's normal or what, but like I did a stint at the University of newspaper when I was an undergrad. And I found out from that, like, man, I really like creating, like the act of writing and creating something intellectual. Like that was a filler for me. I loved going and doing interviews with people and like, kind of learning what they had to tell me. So I like got that learning.
Yeah, probably several buttons for you.
Yeah, and then I got to write it all down and create this, kind of this article that I then got to watch go into the world. And so like
your finished product.
Yeah, and so it's like interesting for me to like try and combine those. But I've stumbled into a lot of fillers where.
Well, and that is a really good point too. In fact, that's one of the challenges in aging. A lot of times we sort of accidentally stumble upon things that work for us, and temperament and personality plays into that as well. We find things that just we're naturally good at or that we naturally enjoy, and a lot of times when we retire, a lot of the things that we incidentally or kind of accidentally had working as fillers in our lives, we no longer have happening serendipitously, and so it's really important to recognize why something's working. I had a partial knee replacement 10 years ago now, and I used to really depend a lot on running as a filler for me, and I love to run. I love trail running, and there's nothing quite like running off the top of a mountain for me. I love it.
Yeah.
And I used to do trail marathons and different things that I really enjoyed, and I was really worried about that when I had my knee surgery because I didn't know what I was going to do to replace that. And had I been really focused on running as the integral part of that, I would have been in trouble. But because I recognized that it was, being in nature, a little bit of the thrill of coming off of a mountain, overcoming myself. I love, I love running up a mountain. I was able to say, okay, what are things that are still available to me at this stage in my life? And with these sort of restrictions that I can still hit those buttons. And that's when I started mountain biking, and it's pretty darn fun to fly off of them.
That's a whole new level of speed. You're getting right. You're getting like a double-edged sword there. It's like you're working harder to get up the mountain on a bike, and then you're getting that double like speed going down the mountain.
Yes.
I think it's like I don't know if root cause or root reason for the filler being a filler. I think that's a similar transition that I've gone through recently that I've talked to you about is like with triathlon, right? So having having a new baby, we've got another one on the way. Training for triathlon is time intensive. Like my chosen passion sport happens to be an extraordinarily time intensive and monetarily intensive activity. And I think it really helped to kind of boil down like what I like about that. And, you know, so some of it is the camaraderie of racing and I enjoy that. So then how do I kind of scale that down? How do I then get my movement, my activity filler, while acknowledging the time aspect, right? Or the limitation of like, hey, you know, like you can't travel across the country with an infant
Right.
to go, you know, to go to a
Right.
race. Cause that when, you know, when I was single and, or didn't have kids, you know, that was one of my big excuses for traveling. So like, hey, there's a triathlon here. So I'm going to like pack up, go do this race, have a good
Yeah.
time. And that was a whole bunch of different fillers. There was social, you know, like all sorts of stuff. But being able to boil it down to like, okay, the movement is what I enjoy. I can still do short races, you know, that are local. One of the reasons I chose to come to San Diego was because of the triathlon culture, um, and the fact that there are races like all over the place here. Now, am I going to go do an Ironman anytime soon? Maybe not immediately, but I can still like get my movement. I can still stay a part of that community, and hit those relationship kind of fillers as well. But kind of the boiling down of that, like, hey, I'm not a professional athlete. Like that's not actually what I'm after. I don't need to like go type A on my actual training. I just need to get that filler, get that movement in, and kind of lean into that aspect of it. And the fact that, you know, like it's a filler for me also because it makes sure I have energy to play with my son.
Right.
Really honing in on that importance of why I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So let me just kind of hit a list of fillers. So exercise is a good one. Service is a good one. Reading, listening to music, hobbies like sewing or art, ceramics, um, writing.
I journal every day.
Yeah, journaling is a great one. You know, taking a nap is a good one. Uh, Watching a football game can be a filler. Going and getting a treat. So really anything that leaves you better off. There's also and I don't know, you want to throw any others in there? Just sort of
Meditation for me.
Yeah.
I also like one thing, and I'm, you know, pose it as a question is like a filler for one person isn't necessarily a filler for another, and like and something that might drain someone doesn't, it fills someone else. Like there can be, is there that kind of swing on people?
Absolutely. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday who was trying to convince me that cleaning her house was a filler. And and you know, it's certainly not a filler for me, but and I don't know that the actual cleaning process is a filler for her, or if like the finished product of not having a dirty house or feeling like she was in a you know, a kind of a chaotic environment was more the filler there. But yeah, it's a good example. And knowing what works for you and what doesn't is super important. Another key component are what I call pseudo fillers. And pseudo fillers are things that generate emotion. They titillate or stimulate, but they don't leave us better off. And a lot of times they actually end up being unhealthy coping. So easy examples of that, pornography is an easy example of that. Other substances are easy, you know, alcohol can be, or drugs can be an easy example of that. Things that where we're looking for resources, but we're not left better off because of that activity. And any good filler can become a pseudo filler. You know, reading. Obviously, reading is a good filler, but if I hole up in my room and read for 8 hours, it's probably crossed over into the pseudo filler area, and I'm avoiding other important things, right? Watching a football game. I enjoy watching football, but if I sit down and watch 2 football games, I've wasted 6 hours of my day, and it's probably become a pseudo filler, right? So it's important to recognize that a filler really does leave us with more resources for having participated in that activity. Religious or spiritual activities are good ones as well. You know, prayer, meditation, like Sean said, you know, scripture study, things like that that can help you plug in to a higher power can also be powerful fillers as well. The research shows that the two most predictably powerful fillers are exercise and service.
I need to be better about service.
Yeah. Well, no, we all probably do. Um, those are the two fillers that we get for which we get the most bang for our buck. You can go and exercise for 30 minutes and ride the wave of resources that you get off of that for quite a while.
Oh yeah. I mean, I start my day, with my morning exercise, whether it's a run or a quick bike. I have a trainer in my garage, so I don't go mountain bike, but I'm road bike for triathlon, obviously. But I have a trainer in the garage, so I can quickly kind of jump on that. And if I miss a morning, and like sometimes it's a mile, like I'm just gonna go do a mile, and get that 10-minute spike, and even just that like clears my mind a little bit, gives me that boost. It's a big filler.
You hit on another important thing there. Most of the time when we're sucking mud, the last thing that we want to do is to expend any energy to fill back up.
Yeah.
And so understanding the balance between stressors and resources, and understanding how the personal reservoir works is super important, because it's when we are sucking mud that we most need to do something to fill back up. Right. And I don't know about you, but and we're kind of hitting exercise hard here, but I don't mean to do that, because it's certainly not the only filler, but I try to exercise 6 days a week, and I probably want to exercise maybe one of those days. Honestly, I'm probably like, oh, I get to go X, maybe one day out of those 6. But the other 5, I do it because I know that I need what I get out of that.
Yep.
And if I only do the things that I feel like doing, we as human beings are not, most of what we want to do isn't healthy and good for us. And so if we only do the things that we feel like doing, most of what we do isn't going to be really great. It's a very different phenomenon if I say, okay, how do I want to feel, and what do I need to do in order to be able to feel like that?
Yeah, that's like, journaling is such a big filler for me, because it allows me to isolate and like get to that root, right? So I can actually say, like, how did I feel today? What did I do? I can reflect on that. So I can like reflect and dream. And it's a really nice way to like pull the threads together and build kind of this past, present, future narrative, and like write it all out and see like, oh, I did this today, and now I feel like this, and I want to feel like this tomorrow. So what do I need to do? And I can kind of weave that together, and then have a concrete, like, okay, it's written down, and then I can flip back and be like, man, I felt so awesome here. Like, look at what I said.
Yeah.
But I think like hitting on that, like how I want to feel, like that's super powerful. Because like a lot of times I wake up in the morning and I do not want to wake up. I'm a morning person.
You get there.
It's actually, I don't know if it's a filler or if it allows me time to do my fillers, but when I wake up early in the morning, like, I'm like 4:30, 5 a.m. If I get up at that time and I have like, I do my meditation, my journaling, my morning run, my 25 minutes of study or whatever, like that block sets me up for just an exponentially better day. Like I'm so much more able to handle, my job or just all the things that come, and I'm more positive and have a better outlook. And so like, if I miss the morning, then I'm so off.
Well, and I'm a little reluctant to do this, because I think in all actuality, you're not in the middle in terms of how you run your day.
Yeah.
But what is your morning routine?
Yeah. So, optimal. So I'll talk about it in a couple ways. So I'll go optimal and then like minimal. And so my optimal is I'm, up at 4:30. I start the day off with 10 minutes of meditation. Um, and, like you can sub that out for prayer or scripture reading, whatever works for you. And, just something mindful, right? Like getting into the present moment. After that, I do my journaling, and it's a quick 5-10 minute session. I don't get carried away. I try and keep it pretty concise. And then right after that, I typically, like you said, I'm a little extreme, so I literally set a 25-minute timer of study. And so I'll do some reading, coding practice, whatever my kind of thing that I'm working on. Right now, I'm actually studying coding, and then also learning about motivational interviewing. So I'm reading the text on motivational interviewing. And then after that, I do my run. So that's optimal, right? And then minimal is a 2-minute, 1-minute, 2-minute mindfulness breathing, quick journaling, like literally I'm like, what are my 3 targets, and what am I grateful for? I won't skip the gratitude journaling. That's part of my journaling practice. And then a 1-mile run. If I can't get the 1-mile run, it's 10 air squats and 25 push-ups and 10 pull-ups. And, I can get all of that done inside of 5 minutes, so if I do it all at once, if I break it up, whatever, but that's my kind of like my range, and just making sure I hit those little buttons really helps me.
Yeah. Now, another point that I want to make kind of related to this is that you don't have to totally revamp your life to effectively manage your personal reservoir, and you can start wherever you are. The real importance of this is that you have enough resources to meet the demands in your life, and recognizing that if you want to be able to do your life effectively, just like you have to have money to pay bills, like you have to have gas to run a car, we have to have resources to be able to run our lives. And excuse me, something as the weather's changing, my allergies have been kind of miserable the last couple of days. But I'm pretty sure I don't have COVID.
Well, there's this 2,500 miles between us.
Right. But I just it's important. I don't want people to feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, I mean, I started with one thing, my kickoff was meditation, actually, and I started out doing like a minute of breathing. And that was my routine. That's where I started. And then I got into journaling shortly thereafter, but it was hit or miss, like some days I do it, and I don't hit every day 100%, I do what I can, when I can, as much as I can. At this point, I have enough of like a history built out but I've constantly changed things. Like I used to meditate in the evening. Now I meditate in the morning.
Yeah.
I used to do my run in the evening. Now I do it in the morning. I still shifted in the evening in the winter, like a lot of times.
You've also found what you need.
Yeah.
You found that if you don't do these things, then your life doesn't go well.
Yeah. My wife doesn't need to do all of this. She's smoother on a completely different routine. And, right. And she's super consistent. It's one of the things that I admire most about her. And her routine looks nothing like mine.
Yeah, which is great. And that's another thing, and that's a relational thing, but it's also super important that we be supportive of one another, and that we are supportive of each individual in the family taking care of their personal reservoirs. And then of course you have to have a balance between personal reservoirs and relationship reservoirs. But what I would invite anybody that's listening to this to do is to take some time and just start by identifying 10 specific individual fillers. What works for you? And I would encourage you to be as specific as possible. You know, ideally don't just say music. Write down either a genre or specific songs or specific artists. You know, if you like movies or comedians or whatever, you know, don't just say movies. But if you're sucking mud, what movie could you pop in and predictably get a hit from? Like, you know, you might think I'm funny, but I love John Denver, and I when I'm sucking mud, I turn on my John Denver playlist, and it
That's
is
awesome.
yeah, within, you know, literally within minutes, I'm on a Rocky Mountain high. So
You know, like I love. So funny that you mentioned John Denver, Bob Seger.
yeah,
Like, and that is way outside of my age group time horizon. Like, but Bob Seger, for some, like, I don't know what it is, but like Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, man, like I can pop that
yeah.
in and immediately, you know, get feeling good.
Yeah. So if you're struggling um, with having enough resources, then I would recommend that you put together what I call a filler toolbox, and literally have, you know, have a playlist or have a list of quotes or journal entries or scriptures or you know, songs or whatever that you can easily grab when you're sucking mud. Because when you're sucking mud, it's hard to generate enough energy to want to do something, enough motivation, and so you really want to remove as many obstacles as you can between you and being able to execute on your fillers. And so do that and play with it. Find out, you know, what fillers work really well for you and which ones are weaker fillers. And I guarantee if you work at effectively managing your personal reservoir, it'll change the way that your life goes.
Yeah, and I think the trial, it's like, has been so important for me. Like just trying things out. And you know, like I use my journal, and like each month I pick things I'm gonna try. And so it's like, and I write them down, and I have like, okay, here are my monthly goals, here are my monthly trials. So what are, like, you know, and I don't get crazy. I mean, I just try different things out, right? You know, like different fillers, different things that work, whatever it is. I just try and make a point of like every month trying a couple things.
Yeah.
And making sure that I don't know, I'm exploring constantly.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great. I really do think you're a good example of that. And I appreciate you taking time. Any sort of closing thoughts on the personal reservoir or personal fillers?
Do it. Just, you know, like make the time. You know, I think the biggest thing for me is accepting that it is so important to everything that you do. You know, like if you want to be a good person to be in a relationship with, if you want to be a good colleague, if you want to be a good parent or friend or whatever it is, you have to take care of you. And prioritizing it just like you would a meeting or time to work on a project at work, and making sure that you approach it with the same level of discipline and thoughtfulness, right? Like, I think that to me is like the number one. It's like, and I know when I lose that and I stop making a conscious attempt, you know, like you said, when you're sucking mud, the last thing you want to do is put out more energy. But as soon as I stop doing that, I know oh man, you know, like I'm not as productive. I'm not as positive. I'm not as fun to be around. I don't like being around me.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think just that's the last thing I would say is just really, like, you know, put the focus and effort into it, and you'll see just immense returns.
That's excellent. I totally agree. And you know, one point that I'll build off of that as we end here is that, you know, taking care of your personal reservoir isn't the end of the story. So it's not important to fill up just so that you've got a full reservoir. It's important to take care of yourself so that you can contribute in healthy ways to relationships, so that you can be a good husband or wife, so that you can be a good dad or mom, so that you can be a good friend, a good son, a good daughter, a good sibling, a good worker, a good boss. It's really, it's important to take care of ourselves so that we can contribute in our lives. And I think we have some confusion in our society now where there's a lot of focus on just the individual, and it slips into selfishness pretty easily, and becomes like, if something's not good for me, you get it. If somebody's not good for you, get them out of your life. And a lot of times we miss the boat. We just tweak it a little bit. It's important to take care of yourself so that you can be a good contributor in your life.
Yeah.
That's important. So anyway, Sean, thanks a ton. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's good to visit with you.
You too.
And any of you that are listening to this, if you have any questions about this, shoot me a whatever, DM me or email me or whatever, so that I can get your questions answered.